This week on the Retirement Quick Tips podcast, I'm talking about how to optimize your health savings account or HSA in 2025. Now, if you missed earlier episodes, go back and listen to them. I talked about the basics of HSAs, why it is so important to utilize a health savings account. Most of you, whether through your employer or if you're buying health insurance through other channels, you're going to be able to select a health plan that allows you to utilize an HSA. That is so important. And I'm not going to go over it in more detail here, but go back and listen to those episodes. If you're not yet convinced, they'll hopefully convince you that you should be fully funding a health savings account every single year. So today I want to talk about why the HSA is still worth maxing out every year and investing for the long term, even if you're worried about over contributing and not using the money for healthcare expenses. So here's something that very few people know or realize, and that is withdrawals from your health savings account. If you use them for non-medical expenses, those are taxed as income. And there's a 20% penalty on top of that. So you really want to use these HSA dollars for medical expenses. And that's the part that I think people get. I think people understand that, like, well, if I don't follow the rules here, I'm going to get slapped on the wrist somehow. And that is true. However, after age 65, that 20% penalty goes away. Now, you still have income on your withdrawals if you don't use the money for qualified medical expenses. If you use it for healthcare related expenses, of which the list is very long and extensive, no problem. That money you can pull out, tax-free withdrawals. It's a beautiful thing. But if for some reason you need to tap into it for other reasons, or you're worried that you're not going to end up using it all and you want to use it for other things, that's okay. After age 65, 20% penalty goes away. You can still take the money out and use it. It's just you pay tax on the withdrawals. But that's no different than you would if you were withdrawing money from an IRA account or a 401k account, okay? So remember that the HSA, you're not handcuffed to using it for medical costs only, or you lose the money or something. That's not true. So the HSA is going to work just like a traditional IRA or 401k in retirement if you don't use the money for medical expenses. Now, you still earned that tax benefit when you made the contributions. You enjoyed the tax-free growth while the money was in the account. But on the way out, if you don't use it for medical expenses, then it's taxable. No big deal. So it's not the worst thing if you over contribute and don't end up using the funds. Don't let that fear stop you from maximizing and investing and allowing your HSA to grow. Because I talked about this yesterday. Average cost that you'll spend after tax money that you're going to spend out of pocket in retirement is in the neighborhood of $165,000. If you're married, that's over $300,000 now that we're looking at lifetime expenses in retirement on medical related expenses only. Chances are you're not going to grow that HSA. Even if you maximize those contributions, invest it wisely, you're not going to grow that to, 150, 200,000, 300,000 or more. If you have dementia or Alzheimer's or certain health related risks in your family that could lead to expensive medical bills later on in life, and the likelihood of that is higher, then even more reason to maximize, save in your HSA for as long as possible. Allow that money to grow for you. Worst case scenario, you end up using it more like an IRA asset in retirement versus an HSA. If you, for some reason, get it up to $500,000, $800,000, $1 million that you never end up using for medical expenses. But again, I have yet to come across a HSA account that's much more than $50,000 or $100,000. That's kind of where I see them topping out. Obviously, that's not the case. There are HSAs out there where if you've saved and invested and been diligent about maxing it out, then you can easily grow it beyond that. But realistically, I don't see it that often, even with high income earners who are good savers. So it's not the worst thing in the world, especially if you don't have long-term care insurance, and the likelihood that you'll save too much money and that money won't get used eventually, I'd say is pretty unlikely. And even if you don't use it all, you're not going to lose it either, because if you're married, the HSA, unused HSA funds, those transfer to your spouse upon your death. So they get to enjoy the same tax-free growth, the same withdrawals, tax-free withdrawals for qualified medical expenses, the same access to the money if they need it for other things too. And then if you and your spouse both die, the money transfers to your beneficiaries. The catch there is that for any beneficiaries other than a spouse, those tax benefits don't transfer. So they don't get to continue to use that money. The health savings account basically goes away. The balance is distributed to your beneficiaries, and then it becomes taxable to them in the year that the account owner dies. So it's a very inefficient way to transfer assets to your heirs. You want to use this during your lifetime, but even if you don't use it all for qualified medical expenses, not a big deal. It's an incredibly efficient way to pay for healthcare costs in retirement. We just don't want to have a lot left at the time of our death or when your spouse dies as well. So you just want to keep that in mind. All right, that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. My name is Ashley Mitchikay, and this is the Retirement Quick Tips Podcast.